Well, our main presentation today is by David Tuma of Tuma Solutions. That's the author of the Process Dashboard, and I'm sure you know Process Dashboard is the premier open source tool that supports the team software process and the personal software process technologies. The functionality of the dashboard has grown and evolved over the last 20 or so years, and as a result, even experienced users of the dashboard are often unaware of some of the powerful features and best practices that are provided by the tool. So that's why I'm excited to welcome David, who is going to be presenting for us Process Dashboard, best practices, tips, and tricks.
Great, thank you very much. I just want to double check and make sure everyone can hear me okay.
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So just as a reminder, we'll be using the screen sharing capabilities of GoToMeeting today for this presentation. So if you have not joined the online portion of the call, please do so. There's a link there in the meeting minutes, and there's also a link in the calendar invitation. So, but I'll just move forward. So for today, I've got several different goals for this presentation. I'd like to empower teams who are currently using the dashboard to achieve new levels of mastery, partially by highlighting the best practices for planning and tracking in the tool, since those have evolved over the years. And also, since new features have been added over time, it's good to be exposed to some of the new functionality that you might not have discovered on your own. Now, for attendees on the call who haven't used the dashboard before, I'll also do my best to fill in background details as I go. And so this presentation will provide a sampling of what's possible. But of course, there is so much more than we can cover in an hour. So I'll go a little fast. Don't worry if you miss something. This presentation is being recorded, so you can go back and watch it again later. And then also I'll just drop in a plug. If you find this type of information valuable, I am available to deliver on-site mastering dashboard workshops to organizations that would like one. Alan Willett and I have delivered several of those over the years to teams in the US, Mexico, and South Africa, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. And then finally, questions are welcome, but do please hold them to the end. All right, so I'm going to start with a presentation and an overview of the best practices for planning in a team project launch. And of course, a team project launch is performed in the application in the process dashboard that we call the Work Breakdown Structure Editor. I'm displaying that on my screen now. For those who haven't upgraded to a more recent version of the dashboard, who haven't used it in a while, I'd like to briefly point out a few user interface changes before I start on the functionality. The first of those is that on the Windows platform, the look and feel of the application has been updated to more closely match native applications. That's something that helps it to appeal to new practitioners of the TSP who in the past had maybe found the user interface jarring. So the look and feel has been updated. And then part of that updated look and feel is that the app does now include a zoom feature, which is something that has been requested over time. So just want to make sure that that's aware. And so if you haven't upgraded to the latest version, that in and of itself may be a reason for you to make the plunge. So moving forward, one of the first things that we do in the launch is take a look at our list of team members. The first step in any new project is to take a look at this team member list and open the, click on the hyperlink that appears in the date header on the team member list. When you click this hyperlink, it gives you an opportunity to set some parameters. The most important one is to choose the start date of your schedule, selecting the date so that it aligns with your weekly status meetings or other reporting boundaries. And then once you've done that, the table on this in this window makes it pretty straightforward to enter the list of team members and their calendar of availability. The columns on this table display weekly periods that start and end on the weekday you selected. And of course, there's a separate row for each team member. You can enter hours per week and exceptions, etc. One thing that I'll just point out that isn't obvious, but it's a nice tip or trick, is that if you're working in this list and you need to change the order of team members, you can click on a name and then drag it in the list, and it'll reorder the list for you. That's something that can be helpful. All right. So as we begin planning for a project, we first need to outline the work that will be required. We do that using the tree here on the left, which allows us to create a hierarchy of components and subcomponents. This particular user interface is very similar to editing an outline in a work doc in an Office document. Pressing Enter creates a new row, and Tab and indent. So as a team, your team might be working on brainstorming a list of features that they need to create. As I said, press Enter to create a new row, press Tab to indent. I'm just entering some different components that a team might be brainstorming that they have to produce as part of their project. As you're typing, you can click on the icon that appears in front of a particular node to choose different types of objects that appear in your work breakdown structure. The most common one is just simply a component. It's a general purpose, can be used to divide or subdivide work. As you're editing, cut, copy, and paste are also supported, including copying and pasting from external sources where you might have done some pre-planning. So I'll just give an example of that. So then also, as you brainstorm the work, it's very useful to enter notes in the, to attach notes to the different components in the work breakdown structure so that you can document the scope of a particular item, any assumptions that you might be taking. Here's an example. If I go ahead and enter something like this, putting those comments in so that you don't forget them helps you to understand understand the time estimates and such that might be attached to components later. Make sure that the team is all on the same page. One of the things that's also very useful in the notes column is that as you're typing a note, it's possible for you to enter a URL. So I'm just going to give you an example. Here I've entered a URL for some related document that's related to this particular work breakdown structure item. When you enter URLs in a note, the dashboard will pick them up and realize that that URL is associated with this particular item. In this example, now that I've got that highlighted, since it has a URL associated with it, I can click the external link button on the toolbar, and it'll bring up whatever document it was that I had linked by that item. Now, this is useful in the work breakdown structure editor, but it's probably even more useful in the, becomes even more useful in the personal dashboard. Here's just an example of what an individual would see later when they are working on this particular component in their personal dashboard. When they select that component on their personal dashboard, the script menu, I'll bring this up so it's a little easier. The script menu will also include, you know, one-click access to any of these URLs that you put in the note. So just kind of a helpful tip or trick. Moving right along, it's, you know, as we're creating the high-level plan for a project, it's also important to capture the size and time that we estimate the different components will take. It's possible to enter those numbers directly in these columns in the work breakdown structure, but there is a much better way. So the best practice is to use what are called proxy estimation tables. Proxy estimation tables provide a quick and customizable way to generate estimates. Teams that have been using TSP for a while may have some historical data that they can use to put together these proxy tables. You can have any number of proxy tables here. I'm showing 3 different proxy tables, one for new software development, one for perhaps a bug fix, one for documentation. Teams, as I said, teams that have historical TSP data may use it to enter small, medium, and large sizes and times for things in these different tables. But of course, if you don't have historical data, you can also use build very quick tables that you use kind of in a planning poker style. So I'm just going to give you an example. With no historical data, a team can just create a simple proxy estimation table and for example, enter the average time that a particular item of this type might take. Let's say the particular item of this type might take, on average, 10 hours. After entering no further information, the proxy estimation table will go ahead and fill in a log normal table based on SCI guidance in terms of best practices for spacing of component estimates, similar to the Fibonacci series that Agile teams might see. Of course, you can go in and change these values however you need to customize the table even further. All right. And one thing that I'd also like to point out is that although the names of the buckets are historically very small, small, medium, large, and very large, it's possible also to create buckets of arbitrary types. I've given an example where it has 3 different buckets for a simple bug fix, an average bug fix, and a complex bug fix. So once you've created these estimation tables, even if they're just simple, you can go back to the work breakdown structure editor and for a particular item, let's say rules workflow is going to be a new development task that is large. Just entering that information, the dashboard goes and pulls up the information from the associated bucket in our proxy estimation table and says that this is going to require an estimated 68 hours of work and possibly be 680 lines of code. If we're looking at this and say, that doesn't sound right, we could possibly also just change it to a different bucket and get a different estimate. Using tables like this makes it easy to generate consistent estimates very quickly. I'll just give an example here. Let's go through here and just enter some quick numbers. So you can see, as you can see, it makes it very easy to put together plans for a project very quickly. One of the things that's also useful is as we make changes, the WBS Editor is looking at the time estimates that we produce, and it's comparing them to the calendar that we put in for the team, and it's calculating the a particular possible planned completion date for the project. We can show this as an example right now. It's saying that the project might be estimated to finish on May 12th. as we change numbers or enter numbers, you'll see that May 23rd, May 24th, that these numbers dynamically update in real time. So even at this early stage, with just the information that we've entered so far, we have a very rough idea of when the project might finish. And even at this very early stage in a launch, this might be enough information to realize that it might be important to raise a concern with stakeholders if the expected delivery dates don't look like they can be met. All right, moving forward. Iterative development is a key project strategy. So in the WBS, these are entered using the Milestones window. The best practice for dashboard usage is to enter milestones for your current. So milestones can represent iterations, sprints, other aspects of cyclical development. The best practice is to include a milestone for your current iteration as well as milestones for future iterations. If your future iterations are open-ended, you can also simply create a backlog milestone. The future iteration should be marked as deferred. This allows us to create high-level plans for those future iterations in the WBS, and the future plans that we create won't get pulled back into the team's plan for the current iteration. Okay, so back on the WBS, we can assign the work in our work breakdown structure to these various milestones. And as we do, I'd like to point out that on the bar on the bottom, we're starting to get colored diamonds indicating that the dates when different work might finish. As we move things around in different sprints, you'll see that these diamonds update accordingly. Now, since several of our milestones do have dates when we're expecting them to be finished, these dates, of course, could be either dates when a particular deliverable has been committed to a customer, or they could be the end dates for a time-boxed cycle iteration. We can turn those on and see, in this example, dotted lines that indicate when the work for a particular milestone needs to be finished. So these dotted lines appear with a vertical dotted line indicating a particular date. In this example, you can see that the work for sprint 1 is finishing before its commit date. The work for sprint 2 is finishing before its commit date, and the work for sprint 3 is finishing before its commit date. So this is a great example of a plan that seems to be working. Obviously, it's important for the diamonds to appear before the dashed lines in order to make sure that we've managed the capacity for our team. So moving forward, as the components in the current iteration take shape, we want to identify the tasks that we're going to use to produce them. The best way to do this is through workflows. So workflows can describe defined processes, or they can simply capture the subtasks that are needed to satisfy teams' definition of done. You can have any number of workflows to describe different types of work. Each workflow has a set of steps underneath that describe the tasks in that particular process. It's important to enter percentage breakdowns for each, for the effort described, the effort needed for each subtask. And also, you can enter in the performed by column the names of actors or people in this process that are going to be performing the work. Once you've created these workflows, we can go back and apply them in the WBS. So in this example, we have going to apply the new feature workflow to this first task. When I do that, it creates the subtasks underneath. It spreads the time out based on my percentages, and it makes a note of the individuals that I say are going to be working on this. At this point, we would go in and we would describe or perhaps list the individuals who are going to be doing this work. We enter their initials. I just told it that the developer was going to be Carlos Munoz and that the reviewer was going to be Nisha Kumar, and that applied those to across the workflow based on the developer and reviewer performed by information that I had. Now, as we start assigning these, you can take a look on the colored bars, and you'll start to see that each team member has a colored bar as well. These recalculate dynamically as well, so that we can see how much work has been assigned to each individual. And of course, it's important to pay attention and make sure that we don't have any individual that is overcommitted. Ideally, we'd like to put together a plan where each individual is finishing their work for a particular milestone and for the plan at the same time. Now, it's also useful or possible to assign workflows to a number of items all at the same time. I'm just going to give an example of that. Just highlighted several different tasks and applied the workflow, and you can see that it's now created a detailed plan for the next several sprints based on our components and our process. Now, the best practice, I believe, though, is still to focus on tasks for the current sprint and to leave future sprints, not to create tasks underneath future sprints quite yet. Okay. As we do this, once again, we can assign work to different individuals. And watch the colored bars update in the bottom. For future iterations, you don't need to create tasks yet, but it still can be useful to go ahead and say that a particular individual is likely to be working on a particular component. This just helps us to, as a placeholder for us to remember who might be responsible for it as we look to the future. As we type all these numbers in, you can see it starting to create, show the plans for each individual team member, when they might finish their work for a given iteration. Sometimes if we're interested in balancing the work for a particular iteration, you can click on one of these bars and it'll highlight the work that each individual is going to be contributing to that iteration, when each person's going to be done. We can see at this point, for example, that Jane Doe has been given much too much work for iteration 1, and she's not going to finish it in time. Some of her work needs to be moved off onto somebody else. Okay. As we're doing these changes, I want to point out also that it's easy to perform various sweeping changes to the work breakdown structure using this interface. One such example, a lot of planning tools, when you start entering things like this, would force or expect you to only make changes on, for example, on a leaf node. But the process, or the WBS editor, allows you to make changes at a higher level too. So for example, the estimate of 21 hours for this component came from the workflow. But if we go back and perhaps the individual who's responsible for it looks into it a little bit further and decides that this is actually going to take more time, they can change that estimate, and everything underneath will update accordingly. Similarly, we just mentioned that Jane Doe is overtasked for sprint 1. So we might take a look at some of the work that Jane Doe is associated with and assign it to somebody else. Looks like Carlos might be a good candidate. And just by changing the estimate on, in this case, the front-end node, it reassigned all the work underneath from Jane to Carlos. So it's easy to make sweeping changes. Another example is that if your workflow definitions changed in the future, like let's say that a team decided that they were going to include a new step in their process. So that now our new feature workflow has changed. That seems like a problem because we've already used this workflow a lot to create tasks in our work breakdown structure. But we can go back and we can reapply the workflow, say that everywhere the new feature workflow is, we would like to update it and reapply percentages and rates. And as I do that, you'll see that it actually went through and did that. It respread the time out according so that the total time estimates were the same, but it redistributed it based on our new task, even assigned the new task to the person based on roles that were in it earlier. So easy to make very sweeping large sweeping changes. So with this, I'll go ahead and leave the WBS editor for now and move on to some of the other aspects of the dashboard. This gives you, so that gives you a very rough idea of how you can quickly create a plan. And I guess that one of the things to point out is that here we've only spent just a few minutes on this call, but we've already created what's becoming a detailed plan for the next 2 or 3 months worth of work without a lot of time or effort involved. So that's what the WBS editor is designed to make this fast, quick, and easy, and to accelerate your team's planning efforts. Okay, so moving along, I want to talk about the some of the charts and reports. The dashboard provides obviously an extensive collection of charts and reports to support data-informed decision-making. We could literally spend days on this topic area. I'm just going to touch on a few highlights using some sanitized project data. So I do have sanitized project data from a team that was collecting, a team of about 70 people that was working for about 2 years. So the data has been scrubbed to protect confidentiality and privacy, but I'm just going to show you some of these charts. One of them, let's see. So this is probably one of the most common charts that people are used to seeing and managing their project with, cumulative earned value chart. It's basically a burnup chart, similar to the chart that's in many mainstream Agile tools. So this chart can tell you if you're ahead or behind, and in this case, this team is about a month behind, but this chart really can't tell you why. And to help with that, I'd like to showcase one of the perhaps unsung charts in the ED gallery that doesn't get as much attention as it should. It's the earned value versus cost chart. It shows the same 2 lines as the planned, as the previous chart did, but it adds a 3rd line, the screen line, for actual cost. This is a great chart because comparing any 2 lines tells us something unusual. As before, comparing the blue and the red lines tells us whether the project is ahead or behind schedule. Comparing the green and the blue lines tells us if tasks are taking longer than planned, and comparing the green and the red lines tells us if the team is being able to spend as many hours per week as they planned. In this example, the green line is much higher than the blue line, indicating that tasks are taking longer than expected. It's likely that the team significantly underestimated how much effort this project would require, and that the final cost of this project will be higher than planned. Now, I could show you the same chart for a different team, just for comparison purposes. This chart is telling a very different story. On this chart, tasks are taking almost exactly as much time as expected. So their estimates were very good. However, the team has not been able to get in nearly as many tasks or hours per week as they expected, and that's what's causing them to be behind. So, obviously that's one of the strengths of earned value planning in the dashboard, or earned value planning in TSP, is the presence of this actual data to be able to give us a feedback loop and to troubleshoot questions such as why the teams are ahead or behind. So moving right along, the Burnup Chart only gives credit for work that's complete, similar to what is done in an Agile tool. So it doesn't give us insight into tasks in progress. It's important for us to track that. And as with Agile tools, the dashboard does provide a Kanban chart in another place for tracking in progress work. But it also provides this visualization, which many teams find more useful. This chart is known as the tasks in progress chart. In this chart, each circle responds to a task in the plan that has been started but not yet finished. The area of each circle shows how much time has been spent on that task. This is a great chart to be reviewing in stand-ups or weekly meetings. So the area of each circle represents the total time that's been spent, total actual time that's been spent on an incomplete task. When tasks take longer than they were planned, a red circle on the red ring on the outside of the circle shows the cost overrun. So here, you can very quickly count 7 open tasks that are taking longer than planned. And also, we can see that this chart contains quite a few circles, which means that there are quite a lot of open tasks, which is concerning considering that this subteam only has 6 team members. Tooltips on individual circles can tell us a little bit about which task is represented and help us to identify which tasks might be in trouble. This chart is configurable through the wrench in the top corner. This particular team has configured the chart so that colors are, the chart is colored with each circle by the individual who is assigned. That means that you can quickly scan the circles of a common color to see if somebody on the team's been spread too thin. Okay, another chart that I'd like to really call attention to that doesn't get used as much as it should, but is extremely powerful, is the external commitments chart. I'm going to show you this. This chart is powerful because it is also highly customizable through the wrench in the top corner. You click the wrench icon to build a chart showing the features that your stakeholders care the most about. And you can even create multiple versions of this chart for different stakeholders. So I'm going to give you an example. As an example, this team has created a second version of this chart called Key Feature Commitments, so that they can keep stakeholders up to date. In this chart that they built, you can see that they're tracking 5 different features. Feature A and Feature Q have already been finished. Feature X, which is the 3rd row in this table, is on track to deliver fairly close to its committed date. And Feature Y is projected to complete a little bit early. Feature Z in this chart is targeted to miss its completion date or its promised date by a couple of weeks. So the team might have to have conversations with their stakeholder to determine whether or not that slip of delivery is going to be a problem. If it is, they can click on the bar and it will show a Gantt chart of the work that is driving that bar, that contributing to that feature. The team can expand out and see which components or tasks might be causing the schedule to slip to see if those things can be moved forward or rescheduled, etc. Okay, so I could highlight a lot more charts for tracking schedule, but definitely not enough time today to cover them. So I'd like to switch gears again and show another chart which is extremely valuable. It's called the Workflow Process Analysis chart. Back on the team dashboard, once you've highlighted a particular project, Workflow Process Analysis is the second item in the list. So if I go ahead and bring that up, what we see is that it first shows us the workflows that this team has defined in their project. We can choose one, and it displays a sophisticated set of reports and charts that are tailored for the workflow in question. This example is an analysis of the team's new feature workflow. This report is analyzing data from a large number of new features that this team has developed over the past few years. And as soon as we open the chart, we can see useful information like, for example, the percentage of time that was spent in each phase. Teams can use this to update task percentages on this workflow when they start their next iteration. As we click around in different areas on this chart, we can see that, let's see. That, let's see. There are also charts for the distribution, log normal distribution of actual time and size that teams could use to build historically accurate proxy tables for future estimation. And then also a number of charts that are great for process improvement and decision support. This chart also supports filtering. So in this example, let's see. Oops. I'm going to go back. I'm going to, instead of the defect fix workflow, I'm going to take a look at the new feature workflow. This one appears that this team has significantly more data for their new feature workflow as compared to their defect workflow. When you see that there's significantly more data, it's helpful to use the filtering capability. This I'm going to go ahead and drill down and just take a look at a smaller handful of components, so making use of this filter. And looking at different subsets can help us to understand characteristics of different types of components on our plan. I'm going to just drill into, obviously there's a lot of charts here, but I'm just going to drill into one to give an example of how we can use some of these charts to learn more about the team's performance. This one is a time and phase chart. Its horizontal axis shows different components that have been completed over time in chronological order. So whenever the team completes a new component, it'll be added to the right side of this chart, where the team can review its quality characteristics. So the vertically stacked areas on this chart are showing what percentage of time was spent on various phases of team's workflow. It makes it easy to quickly spot components that have unusual time allocations. So for example, the developer of this second component spent almost no time at all in personal design review, which is the magenta stripe, and very little time in personal code review, which is the gray stripe. This caused them to encounter significant problems in integration test, which is the blue area. The fourth component had the same pattern, required even more time in integration test. So the final component in this chart, the one that's completed most recently, shows a much better pattern. This developer took time to build a quality design and review it thoroughly. And after the team design inspection, the integration testing took almost no time at all. So, which is pretty much the ideal scenario. That's just a high-level example. We've only scratched the surface for the charts in this report, but I wanted to call out because if you've been using the dashboard and your team has defined workflows, then this report is ready and waiting for you. It is a gold mine for project retrospectives and process improvement ideas. So go take a look at it. And it's worth noting that this report is also available in the personal dashboard, so individuals can also use it to find trends in their personal data. Okay, so speaking of workflows, I wanted to maybe just highlight some really quick advanced functionality that is back in the work breakdown structure editor for advanced teams. Just wanted to show when we were looking at the workflows as before, there's a column or a button on the toolbar that allows you to show additional workflow columns. By default, it's showing the columns that are used by most teams. But if you click this, then it'll allow you to select additional items. Some of these are extremely useful for high maturity teams. So for example, I'm turning just a few of these on. We can turn some of these on and enter the estimated defect injection rate for different construction phases and the estimated yields for different quality and testing phases. So information like that can be used to produce quality plans and track progress against those plans in both the team and the personal dashboard. I also would like just to briefly point out the script URLs column that this allows you to enter URLs just like we did in Notes that point to something on the web, like, for example, a wiki or a Google Doc, etc. That's extremely useful if your team has, as an example, a process script for one of these workflows. They can attach those URLs, and when they do that, and an individual is working on this task in their personal dashboard, the process scripts that you've attached will show up at their fingertips once again. Okay, so all the functionality I've demonstrated so far is built into the open source process dashboard application, so it, of course, is all available free of charge. I'd like to take a quick moment to highlight a couple of paid items that also add extreme value to the open source application. One of them is the Process Dashboard Enterprise Server. Just going to bring this up real quick. The Process Dashboard Enterprise Server is something that a product that you can install in your organization that dramatically simplifies the setup and management of team data in your organization. So teams that have used the dashboard before know that setting up a new team can be very difficult. So with the Process Dashboard, it becomes a one-click affair, or a one or two-click affair. I can say I want to create a new data set. In this case, I just give an example of a name for a team dashboard that I'd like to create, and I click Save, and it's been created. We can grant permissions within the enterprise server to allow other individuals, like team members, coaches, team leaders, etc., to open this particular team dashboard. When we do grant those permissions and people log into the enterprise server, they'll see it in the list on their home page. And at that point, it's just a matter of clicking on it to launch the dashboard. Apologize, this is launching on a separate screen, so you're not seeing the splash screen. But without having to install or set up or know the location of team data, they just click on something and it can open up this particular team dashboard. So it even downloads the most recent version of the Process Dashboard software if necessary to make sure that the individual is up to date. All of the data all of the team data that's entered in this way, team and personal data, is stored in a database, so a DBA can set up automatic backups and make sure that you have a disaster recovery plan for all of your TSP data in your organization. And also, there's a feature that is very useful that I would describe as a time machine feature. We look at any of these data sets. There's a feature that allows us to pick a particular date in the past and open the dashboard showing historical charts, reports, and historical data as they appeared on that date. So it's easy, it makes it possible to go back, for example, and take a look at what the plan looked like immediately after a launch, or also recover from mistakes or errors if those might have happened. So these are just a couple of the things that, of the features that are in the enterprise server. There are a lot of others. The organizations that have used this have testified that it provides enormous value. So something that your organization is interested in, just want to make people aware of its existence. And if it's something your organization is interested in, feel free to contact me and for more information. And then one other item I'd like to point out, today's presentation has just touched on the tip of the iceberg when it comes to process dashboard functionality. Alan Willett and I have delivered an on-site mastering dashboard workshop to several organizations over the years. And that workshop has taken their teams and coaches to a new level in their ability to command the tool, accelerating their performance and opening up new opportunities for empirical process improvement. It's a multi-day workshop that's customized to your organization's needs. So if that sounds like something that's that your team is interested in, then also feel free to contact me for more information. All right, so that kind of brings us to the end of this presentation and to the, we're right up close to the top of the hour as well. So I can just stop here and open it up for questions.
Thank you, David. Are there any questions from anyone who's on the call?
Yeah, hi, David. Daryl. I have a quick question. It is kind of a minor question, but I think it will maybe highlight some of the robustness in the tool. And that is, if we have a situation the team creates a process where the percentage distributions for that process don't add up to 100%. They're putting percentages in, they don't add up to 100. How does the process dashboard handle that?
It's perfectly fine for the percentages not to add up to 100. And as an example, if you might have noticed that when I gave my demo earlier, I even broke this workflow sum because it used to say 100, and then it used to add up to 100, and I added this new phase, which is 5. So now we're giving 105%. No, but realistically speaking, what happens is that the dashboard or the WBS uses these whatever numbers you put in this column basically as weights. So it does its own sum, adds up, figures what they add up to, and then distributes a time estimate based on these weights. So if you didn't add up to 100, it's not a problem at all. It just corrects it so that it does kind of silently add up to 100 in the background on your behalf.
David, it's Brad Hodgins. I'd
Yes.
like to know, how did you get the Change Tab Columns button to appear in your toolbar?
This one.
Yes.
So this button appears in the toolbar for the common team workflows. It should always be there. You can also get to the same functionality. So anytime you're in the workflows window, you should see this button in the toolbar. It's also available. The same functionality is available by clicking in this top right corner. So you may be thinking about the work breakdown structure editor window itself.
You're
it
right.
doesn't have a similar thing in its toolbar. Its Change Tab Columns is in the tabs menu.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the group?
One thing that I just remembered as Brad typed up is that there's another advanced feature in workflows that I forgot to mention earlier. It's that when you're looking at a particular workflow, the clicking on the node menu allows you to indicate the type of each task. These to map each task to the phases in an underlying metrics collection framework. Those, in this case, our underlying metrics collection framework is the TSP. Sometimes the mapping isn't is great, and sometimes it's not exactly precise. But the most important thing is to make sure that you're mapping to a given, mapping each task to the closest, mapping it to an underlying metrics selection framework that is either overhead, construction, appraisal, or failure as appropriate for the task that you are describing. That makes it possible for the workflow process analysis report to do all of its magic. But one of the things that I wanted to point out here is that there is an item in this list called Personal Probe Task, which you can select generally as the first task in your process and replacing a planning task. When you put a probe task in, it basically imbues this workflow with all of the high maturity behaviors that we traditionally expected from, that we learned about in the PSP class. So this workflow in the personal dashboard, this workflow will receive a component plan summary form, it will receive a size estimating template, and it will receive the probe wizard, which gives individuals the access to all of those fantastic tools that they used in the PSP course, but not just for software, but for any type of work that they might be doing. So in this case, for example, if I added a probe task to my business analysis, then this business analysis task, even though it isn't developing software at all, the people performing this work are going to have the ability to draw upon their own personal database of historically completed tasks and use it to create linear regression adjusted, bias corrected estimates with prediction intervals for new work. So that's a great feature that's available too, just worth pointing out. So other questions?
Hey, David. I'm wondering if you could just comment on the size of the user community, you know, how many people have downloaded the dashboard, that kind of thing.
The user community is still an appreciable size. I want to say that the current release of the dashboard, last time I checked, it had been downloaded somewhere around, I want to say 7,000 times in the first few months after it was released. So that's encouraging. It does indicate that there are people out there that that care enough about TSP and about high maturity methods that they're downloading the tool and using wanting to get access to the latest version. I'd have to go out and do a quick search to get more updated information, but that was the information that I saw the last time I looked.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Well, David, thank you so much for this excellent presentation. I personally really enjoyed it.